tonight. This is a Spencer County America 250 presentation, and this is the Governor Isaac Shelby chapter of the Sons of the American Revolution. I am happy to introduce Scott Giltner and John Goss, the fifer and drummer for the Sons of the American Revolution, and we hope you enjoy the presentation.
Introduced us, I won't redo that, but that song we just played is called Welcome Here Again. It was a song that would traditionally be used whenever people gather or an important person showing up, that you play that as kind of a welcoming song. A little bit about this presentation before we get too far into it. I like to tell people it's got a little bit of an identity crisis. It's either a historical presentation with musical interludes, or it's a concert with historical anecdotes thrown into it. So I'll let you guys decide which one by the end. But in this, we're going to be talking a lot more at the beginning. As the presentation progresses, there'll be more and more music. What I want to start out with is talk a little bit about the instruments. This is a fife. It's in the flute family, but it's called a fife, which comes from a German word, fife, which is derived from a Latin word which means to chirp like a bird. So as you hear it sounds a lot like a bird chirping. This is made out of grenadilla wood. It is a wood from Africa. They did have it in Europe and North America at the time of the American Revolution. It's a very good wood for musical instruments. It's the same wood they make clarinets and oboes out of. This is the actual color of the wood. It's not painted, it's not stained. Grenadilla wood is black. And this is like top of the line wood for fifes. In North America, they would also make them out of maple and persimmon, but the sound is not nearly as good. This one's made out of maple. So it's lighter. You know, if you hold these two, this is very heavy wood. If you put it in water, it's going to sink. It's that heavy.
This is a rope tension snare drum. As you can see, the ropes, that's what gives it the name. When you pull down, these little tabs right here are called ears. So when you pull them down, it tightens up let's see if I can hold this up, like the loops on here and the heads on here. So it presses down and it tightens the heads up on the drum, which kind of gives it that kind of a tighter and a bounce like that. The shell is usually typically made of oak or ash or cherry. I believe this is cherry wood shell. As you can see on the bottom, like I said before, it's a rope tension snare drum. You can see the little wires right here. Those are the snares, and that's what kind of gives it that kind of a ringing, kind of a sound. Back in the day, these were called catgut, but no cats were harmed in that. That was just the name. But they were actually made of pig intestines or lamb intestines, dried out, something like that. And same as the heads. These are just modern drum heads, but in the 18th century, the heads were made of a calf skin or lamb skin, something soft and kind of thin. So, rope tension drum.
Yeah. Now a little bit about who the fifers and drummers were. If you look at the Continental Army, we had the big generals like George Washington, Lafayette. Their fifers and drummers would have been semi-professional. They would have been very good. They would have been a little bit older, probably in their early 20s, maybe a little bit in their late 20s. There's a lot of competition for good fifers and drummers. There's a lot of records of different officers poaching musicians from other officers. I'll give you a little bit more money, or I'll give you better food, something like that, because it was once you get to be a senior officer, it was very prestigious to have good fifers and drummers, because that's what you would use to entertain important people whenever they visited. Now the rest of them, most of the fifers and drummers would have been much younger. They would have ranged primarily from the ages of 7 to 15. By the time a male was 16, he was considered old enough to be a soldier, so they didn't really like taking able-bodied males off the fighting lines to be a musician, so they like to pick those age ranges. A lot of times if a father would go off to fight and he had a son in that age range that could play a fife or drum, he'd go with his father and be the fifer drummer for his father's unit. In my family in the American Revolution, there were 6 brothers. 5 of them were old enough to fight, the youngest one wasn't. So when the older brothers went off to fight, the younger one went with them, and he's listed as being the fifer for their company.
So would he have been counted as a soldier, and would he get, like if the SAR he was born in?
Oh, yeah.
He would be,
Oh, yeah.
even though he may have been 7 years old?
Oh, yeah. Now, one thing about it is, generally speaking, the younger boys are going to be the fifers, and you see frequently a fifer becomes a drummer, but it's extremely rare to see a drummer becoming a fifer. Does anybody want to guess why? It's a lot lighter. So usually the fifers were the younger boys, and you know, it could be a fifer throughout his entire career, but otherwise, usually the trend is to become a drummer. The music at the time of the American Revolution, the way the armies used it, had 3 main purposes. The first one was inspiration. So if you guys have ever been to like YMCA's, fitness centers, if you haven't done it, you've probably seen other people that have got earbuds in, listening to music while they exercise. It's been proven that when you listen to music, it distracts your brain, so you can physically work out longer, harder, faster. They would use the same thing back then. You play music, you can get the men to march a little bit faster, a little bit longer than you could normally. We'll talk about another application of inspiration here in a minute. Second one is entertainment. Most of the soldiers at the time of the American Revolution would probably been late teens to late 20s. You know, get some outside that range, but primarily late teens, late 20s. At the end of the day, in camp, whenever the chores are done, frequently for entertainment, they would have concerts for the soldiers. Because if you get males that age, what's going to happen? They're going to get bored, and then what happens? Yeah, gambling and drinking, and then you got trouble. So they'd give concerts to kind of keep them out of trouble. Third purpose is communication. You remember back then they didn't have cell phones, they didn't have walkie-talkies, so they used it for communication on the battlefield. So on the battlefield, you had 3 forms of communication available to you. You could yell, which if you guys have ever been to a reenactment where they've done black powder, there's a lot of noise. And on a full-blown battlefield, if I was yelling, the back row could probably tell I'm yelling, but they're not going to really understand me. And after a while, I'm going to lose my voice. The other option was to get a piece of paper, and I could write a message on it, give it to a courier, and say, go find Colonel Smith, he's over on that hill. Well, if he can find Colonel Smith, by the time he finds him, it could be old news. So it could be a message telling him to charge, but things have changed on the battlefield. You don't want him to charge, you want him to stay put, and he just got orders saying charge, he charges, and there's a disaster. So the third option for communication was through music. So they had tunes, basic tunes to tell the soldiers what to do on a battlefield. Move forward, move left, move right, move backwards, charge, retreat, etc. All the basic moves they had. And another thing about the fife and drum is they rise above the noise of the battlefield, and they carry very well. Last fall we were doing an event at a state park, and it was a multi-day event. The second day, this family came down, they had little girls with them, and I'd been playing the fife, and they came up and they go, "You're what we were hearing." And they said they lived about a mile away from the state park. And the girls had heard me playing the fife, and they were running around the backyard because they thought there was somebody in the backyard playing music. I was shocked it carried that well, because it was rolling hills and trees, and I was like, well, it really does carry well. Also in camp, the daily routines in camp were governed by music. So they had a song to tell them when it's time to wake up, a song to collect water, a song to collect firewood, a song for supper, a song for when it's time to go to bed. Now, the song we're going to play for you now, it's like an emergency call. It's called To Arms. And the situation where this could be played would be, say you've been in camp for several days, everything's been real quiet, you're not expecting anything to happen, and out of nowhere, your enemy has shown up, and they're close by, and they're lining up to attack. So this is a song that the fifers and drummers would play to tell everybody, grab your weapons, line up, and get ready to fight. Now, the interesting thing about this song is, you think an emergency call would be kind of fast-paced or frantic. It's not. If I didn't tell you what the purpose of this song was, you would never guess it was an emergency call. So here's to arms. And they would just play that over and over. So anybody hearing that song knows, grab your weapons, line up, and get ready to fight. Now they had very specific times on when the musicians could practice. It was usually around 11 o'clock in the morning. Does anyone want to fathom a guess as to why they had very specific times and everybody knew when practice time was? What did I just play for you? Yeah, an emergency call. If we could practice that any time of the day, we're going to throw the camp into chaos every time we play it. But they had very specific times, so everyone knew we can ignore the fifers and drummers at that time. They had very specific, very severe punishments for the fifers and drummers if they practiced outside their scheduled time. The worst punishment could be flogging, which, as you know, is wicked. Now, the interesting thing about that is that within the armies, whenever a soldier was flogged, it was usually administered by a drummer. The drummers were responsible for providing flogging. So if a drummer was to be flogged, I don't know who flogged him. Another thing is that the fifers and drummers evidently had a little bit of a reputation, because I came across an order from George Washington saying that if any of the sergeants and corporals were caught socializing or drinking with the fifers and drummers, they were to be demoted one rank. So there you go. Yeah. A little bit about our clothes, what we're wearing. A lot of people, when they see us wearing red, they think we're representing British soldiers. We're not. We're representing American musicians. The musicians were non-combatants, which means we don't fight, so we're not supposed to be harmed on the battlefield. We're on the battlefield with the soldiers, but we're not supposed to be harmed. So fifers and drummers would wear colors that contrast with the soldiers on their side. So the American soldiers predominantly wearing blue, American musicians wear red, so we stick out. Now, we're not supposed to be harmed, we're not supposed to be shot at, but fifers and drummers did get shot, some of them did get killed. On the British side, they wore red coats, so their fifers and drummers would be wearing brown, green, blue, and maybe yellow. The other reason we need to stick out on a battlefield is that, as I mentioned earlier, we're playing tunes to tell the soldiers what to do. So we're going to be assigned to an officer. And so in the confusion of the battle, with everybody moving around, the officers need to be able to find their fifers and drummers easily so they can tell them what commands they want to be played. Okay, next song we're going to play for you, I talked a little bit about inspiration, music being used for inspiration. I assume you guys are all familiar with the battles of Lexington and Concord, and you know about the North Bridge. I'll just reprise it real quickly. At the Battle of the North Bridge, was north of Concord, the British were on one side, and they were getting ready to cross over. Now, you need to understand, at this time, the British Army was the best army in the world. They were the best equipped, best trained, had lots of experience. On the other side of the bridge was a militia unit from Acton, Massachusetts. They had occasional weekend training, maybe once a month they'd have a little bit of training. They weren't nearly as good as the British. They knew they weren't. The British knew they weren't. But the Americans on top of the hill knew they had to march down this hill and stop the British at the North Bridge. And this is the first time the Americans attacked the British. Now, the story of this battle goes that as the Americans were marching down the hill, their fifers and drummers were playing a tune called the White Cockade. Now, the White Cockade, there's a couple purposes for it. The first one is it's associated with the Jacobite rebellion in Scotland of 1745. It's an anti-British tune. So by them playing it as they're marching down to attack the British, it's kind of an in-your-face to the British. The other reason is it's a happy, peppy song. And so you can imagine the Americans marching down this hill. They're not really excited. They're not really thrilled. about taking on the best army in the world. So you need to provide a little music that will inspire them, to give them a little bit of courage to get ready to do what they're going to do. So this is the White Cockade. The next song we're going to play for you is referred to as a departure song. So it's a song that you would play when someone is going away on a long trip, a long journey. The name of it is The Girl I Left Behind, sometimes called The Girl I Left Behind Me. It's a very old tune. They're not exactly sure how old it is, but they think it goes back at least to Queen Elizabeth. The lyrics we have for you on that sheet are dated from 1758 during the French and Indian War. The lyrics talk about a man leaving his wife and home behind. He's going on this long journey, and it sounds like he's going off to fight in a war, because it makes a reference to Bristol, which at that time the British had a camp at Bristol, England, because they were fearing a French invasion. But anyway, he's going on this long journey, and the lyrics are basically saying that he's sorrowful that he's leaving his wife behind. He's looking forward to the day he comes back. So this song, it was sung a lot whenever a man would go off on a long journey, a sailor when they ever left home, when someone went off to war. In the American Revolution, on the American side, whenever the men would gather to go off to battle, they would frequently meet at the nearest church or the nearest village, and once everyone got there, then they'd march off and leave. And so frequently this was a song they would play as the men were leaving. Now, strangely enough, this is a happy, peppy song, and I think probably if you think about it, when someone's leaving, you don't want to depress them. So you kind of have a happy song to have them leave on a happy note. But if you listen to this tune, you may sound a little bit familiar to you. Those of us who are a little bit older, this has been used in commercials in the past. Okay, the next song we're going to play for you is probably the most iconic song from the American Revolution, and to be honest, it's probably the only song most of you know from the American Revolution. Anybody want to make a guess? Yankee Doodle. Did you know Yankee Doodle originally was an anti-American song? The story behind this, the tune, again, is extremely old. They think it goes back to the 15th century or maybe even earlier. The tune was very popular in Europe. They've identified almost 200 different verses associated with the tune. As far as we're concerned with the American Revolution, this comes into play in 1755 during the French and Indian War. A British surgeon by the name of Richard Shuckburgh is credited with writing lyrics that were not very complimentary about the Americans. Basically in the lyrics, he's talking about the Americans are cowards in battle and that they are rude to the British officers. Fast forward to 1768, the British are occupying Boston. The British kept playing this as kind of a taunt towards the Americans. So in 1768, when the British are occupying Boston, whenever they're marching around Boston, their fifers and drummers would frequently play Yankee Doodle just as a taunt to irritate the people in Boston. Fast forward to 1775, the lyrics at that time on the British side are telling the story of an American farmer and his teenage son visiting a military camp. And the lyrics are from the viewpoint of the teenage son, and the lyrics are basically describing the father and son as being kind of country bumpkins. They don't really understand what they're seeing in this sophisticated military camp. So for instance, they see a drum. The son describes it as being a barrel with leather heads, and when they hit it with these little clubs, people come running. They see a cavalry charge, and they think it's a horse race. And then at the end of the lyrics, some soldiers are digging a latrine, and the son asks them what they're doing, and they tell them that they're digging graves, and the son gets scared, runs home and hides in his mother's room. So, and again, the words Yankee Doodle Dandy. At that time, a doodle was a foolish person, and a dandy was someone who dressed or tried to portray themselves as being someone socially higher than what they really were. So basically, Yankee Doodle Dandy is saying the Americans are these unsophisticated, foolish people. Now, fast forward again, we're going to go to the surrender at Yorktown. Oh, then we'll go back to 1775. The Americans eventually did embrace the song as being, it's our song and we're proud of it. At the battle, or before the battles of Lexington and Concord, as the British are marching out of Boston going to Lexington and Concord, there are accounts saying that the British again were playing Yankee Doodle to kind of irritate and annoy the Americans. After the Battle of Concord, when the British are making a mad dash to get back to Boston in safety, you know, they're having a running battle, all the Americans are coming out of the woods and shooting at them. So all the British are making a mad dash to get back. There's accounts saying that the colonists, as the British are making this mad dash back, are singing Yankee Doodle back to them. It's kind of like, yeah, who's your Yankee Doodle now? So from that point on, from what I can see, it appears that's when Yankee Doodle sort of became a favorite song on the American side. Okay, now we're going to fast forward to Yorktown. And during the war, the lyrics were very fluid. Both sides would change them pretty regularly. At the surrender of Yorktown, as the Americans with the French defeated the British, and at the surrender ceremony, the Americans were lined up on one side, the French were lined up on the other, and the British were to march through. The British wanted it to appear, they made every effort they could to make it appear like they were surrendering to the French. To surrender to the Americans would have been a huge embarrassment to them. So as they're marching through these lines, they would only look at the French. And this comes from an eyewitness to the surrender ceremony. He said that the British were only looking at the French. They totally ignored the Americans, which was an insult at the time. General Lafayette, who's on the American side, sees what's going on, so he has his fifers and drummers strike up Yankee Doodle. When he did that, it caught the British off guard, and they kind of turned to see where this music was coming from, so Lafayette kind of tricked the British into acknowledging the presence of the Americans. Now, who wants to tell me some words they know from Yankee Doodle?
What?
Words.
Words?
Yeah, what words do you know from Yankee
Well,
Doodle?
you got 8 verses on that thing.
Yeah. Without looking at that. Come on, we're all in grade school, hopefully you sung it. Yankee Doodle went to town riding on a pony, stuck a feather in his hat and called it macaroni. Okay, in the song,
I thought that was in there for sure.
macaroni is not food. Macaroni was a word for high fashion at that time. So if you see sketches or paintings of people that wearing these huge, elaborate, gaudy clothes, big buttons, big colorful ribbons, big buckles, big wigs, big hats with big feathers, that's macaroni. Now, those lyrics did not appear. The first time we can find them is 1842, way after the American Revolution. So evidently, the British still hadn't gotten over the American Revolution in 1842. It appeared in a book called Nursery Rhymes for Children in England. But basically, the song is saying, stuck a feather in his hat and called it macaroni. Basically, again, it's insulting the Americans, saying that the Americans think all they got to do is stick a feather in the hat and they've achieved high fashion. And just as an aside, we do this presentation a lot to school groups, and anybody who grew up watching Barney does not know this song. Because when I do it for school groups, I won't tell the name of it. I'll say, I'm going to play a song for you. You tell me what you think the name of it is. And probably 8 or 9 times out of 10, they will say it's the Barney song. So it's kind of a thing we need to work on to make sure future generations know Yankee Doodle, because again, it's probably the only song from the American Revolution people are going to know. Okay, the next song we're going to play for you is a little bit. Oh yeah, we got to do it. I have a habit of doing that. This time to copy. Ready? Song. It's called Address to the Ladies, and it is from 1767. And the Address to the Ladies, as the title would say, is a song directed towards the women in the colonies. This song came out 4 days before the Townshend Acts were going to be enacted in the colonies. And if you don't know what the Townshend Acts were, they were a series of acts that were putting duties on all sorts of goods imported from England. So the basic theme of this song that was written about 80 years before, called Address to the Ladies of London in the Selection of Their Husband. In that song, the lyrics are basically warning women to be very careful about who they select as their suitors, because they may have less than honorable intentions. Now, that's one thing you'll see in some of the future songs we're talking. The original song had a theme to it, advising women on something. So frequently they take that tune and kind of change. The meaning is still the same. It's still a warning or advising the women to be careful, but it has a different story or different message to it. And you'll see that in some of the other songs we're going to be doing here in a bit. So some of the lyrics in here, it talks about throw aside your bohea and your green hyacinth tea and all things with a new fashioned stiff duty. Procure a good store of the choice Labrador, for there'll soon be enough here to suit you. Bohea and green hyacinth tea were the 2 most popular teas drunk in the colonies. So it's specifically calling out, don't drink these teas or don't buy them. The Labrador it's talking about is a domestic tea that was made from evergreen bushes that grew in Canada and the northern colonies. So because these are domestic grown plants, they avoid the duty that the British were placing on tea. So again, it's a way of kind of boycotting getting around the Townsends. Now this song, it has a different sound to it. It's much more mellow. On the fife, I actually play it in the lower key, so it's kind of a softer, more mellow tune. Let me just make sure I got the right register. You're playing a high register all the time. It's hard to switch to the low sometimes. next song is called the Liberty Song, and it's from 1768. John Dickinson wrote it. If you guys are familiar with some of the founders, John Dickinson was very prominent in the founding of our country. He was a member of the First and Second Continental Congress. He wrote letters from the Pennsylvania Farmer, which were letters kind of promoting and encouraging people to support the American cause. He wrote the lyrics except for 8 lines. He said Arthur Lee wrote 8 of the lines in the song, but he never said which 8 lines Arthur Lee wrote. Now, the Liberty Song is considered the first patriotic American song. It's the first one to espouse liberty and all the freedoms and liberties that we would later request or call for in the Revolution. Now, the Liberty Song, he did borrow the tune. The tune he borrowed is from a song called Heart of Oak. And at the time, it was the British Navy's theme song. So, Heart of Oak is a very patriotic British song, as I talked about just a minute ago. He took a tune that was associated with patriotism, took that tune and put American lyrics to it, so he's changing a British patriotic song to an American patriotic song. Now, with social media we have today, someone will put something on Twitter or Facebook or something that's controversial, and then someone else fires back at them, and you got this back and forth going on. That's really nothing new. It just happens faster now. So, this song, how it came to be was in February of 1768, a few months after the Townshend Acts were engaged. The Massachusetts legislature wrote a circular letter to all the other colonies asking them to join together and have a unified front against the Townshend Acts. The provincial governor, Bernard, he had asked the legislature to rescind their letter. They refused to rescind it, so he dissolved the legislature and sent everybody home. So what that meant is the average person in Massachusetts had no voice in the government. It was just the provincial governor appointed by England was the only government they had. So John Dickinson wrote the Liberty Song in response to what was going on. It came out in July of 1768. A few weeks later, a parody of his song comes out. And the parody is written by someone who has obvious loyalist inclinations or pro-British inclinations. In the newspaper, it says that the lyrics came from Castle William. Now, Castle William at that time was an island in Boston Harbor, and because of all the turmoil that was going on in Boston, a lot of the British officials were actually living on Castle William for safety reasons. So simply by saying it came from Castle William, it's telling the public this came from a British official on this. Now, the rumor was a British custom agent by the name of Harry Helton wrote the lyrics to this parody, which I'll read some of them to you in a second. Henry Helton publicly denied he wrote the lyrics. Now, whether he denied it because he actually didn't write them, or he's just trying to save his skin, I don't think we'll ever know. But he did publicly deny it. So in the parody that came out, the first verse, just to give you an example of some of the things in there, it says, "Come shake your dull noodles, ye pumpkins and ball, and own that you're mad at their liberty's call. No scandalous conduct can add to your shame, condemn to dishonor, inherit the fame." And the chorus goes, "In folly you're born, and in folly you'll live, to madness still ready, and stupidly steady, not as men but as monkeys, the tokens you give." Now, in the subsequent stanzas, there's 10 stanzas. The next 9 stanzas describe the patriots as being minions of Satan, villains, drunkards, robbers, and knaves, amongst other unpleasant monikers. And then in the 4th verse, there's a not-so-veiled threat to hanging. And it says, "The tree which the wisdom of justice hath reared should be stout for their use, and by no means be spared. When fuddled with rum the mad sots to restrain, sure Tyburn will sober the wretches again." Now, Tyburn, the reference to Tyburn there, at that time, Tyburn was the main execution spot outside of London. That's where they did all the hangings. So, the first line says, "The tree which the wisdom of justice hath reared," that's referring to a hanging tree, and the reference to Tyburn is definitely talking about executing people. Now, the next week, a rebuttal comes out to this one. So here you got this back and forth. It's just taking a week or two at a time to do it. The rebuttal that comes out is pro-American. It's attributed by a man named Dr. Benjamin Church. And this comes from a diary entry of John Adams. In his diary, he credited Benjamin Church as writing these lyrics. The interesting thing about Benjamin Church is 6 years later during the war, he's going to be convicted of being a spy for the British. So, flip-flopping sides there, I guess. So anyway, the version that Benjamin Church comes out with, the first stanza goes, "Come swallow your bumpers, you Tories, and roar, that the sons of fair freedom are hampered once more. But know that no cutthroats our spirits can tame, nor a host of oppressors shall smother the flame." And then the chorus goes, "In freedom we're born, and like sons of the brave, we'll never surrender, but swear to defend her, and scorn to survive if unable to save." Now, remember I told you about the threat to the loyalist version, the fourth stanza of the threat of hanging? This one has a rebuttal to that in the fourth stanza as well. And this makes a reference to the book of Esther in the Bible. "The tree which proud Haman for Mordecai reared stands recorded that virtue endangered is spared, that rogues whom no bonds and no laws can restrain must be stripped of their honors and humbled again." So again, if you know the story of Esther, Haman was building a gallows to hang Mordecai, but in the course of the story, things switch and Haman gets hung by his own gallows. So in the rest of the stanzas, there's a lot of insults to the Americans. So in the rebuttal, there's also a lot of insults to the loyalists. So in other places in the song, the lyrics, they're talking about the loyalists are referred to as tyrants, minions, rogues, and pimps. Now, another thing in this song, in the version that Benjamin Church is credited as writing, he has a line in there, "By uniting we stand, by dividing we fall." Does that sound familiar? Yeah, it's on the Kentucky flag.
Yeah.
Only two states have it on their flag, Kentucky and Missouri. And you may not have known this, but y'all know who Isaac Shelby was? First and fifth governor, Revolutionary War hero. This was one of his favorite songs. And we think that's probably how we came to the motto, "United we stand, divided we fall." That actually comes from one of Aesop's fables. It's sometimes referred to as the four oxen and the lion, sometimes the four bull and the lion. But basically in that Aesop fable, this lion keeps trying to attack the bulls, but every time he tries to attack, the bulls put their rear ends together and put their horns out. He can't attack them. So what the lion does is he goes to each of the bulls separately when they're by themselves and whispers little things about the other bulls, kind of sows dissension. So when he attacks the next time, the bulls don't cooperate and he can pull them down one by one. Okay, so that's the Liberty Song. Okay, the next song we're going to play for you is, we keep calling them British Grenadiers, we really shouldn't call that, we should call it by its proper name, the New Massachusetts Song of Liberty. It comes from 1770. In February of 1770, in the newspaper there's this big announcement about a concert that a local guy gives. And it says that he sang this new song that was written by a patriot in Boston. That's the only reference we have to who wrote it. Some people have speculated that Joseph Warren wrote it. He could have written it, but there's no definitive proof he did write it. Unfortunately, Joseph Warren died in 1775, and he never acknowledged whether he wrote it or not, so we'll probably never know. Now then, this song, as I said, it was sung at a concert in Boston in February of 1768, or sorry, 1770. What happened in March, the next month in Boston in 1770? Somebody said it, Boston Massacre. Who was involved in the Boston Massacre? British Grenadiers. 6 of them were British Grenadiers. The tune for this song is from the song British Grenadiers, which is about the British Grenadiers. Now usually when you see a song like this come out, it spreads like wildfire. You start seeing it printed in other newspapers, you start seeing it printed on broadsides. After the Boston Massacre, this song just disappears. And I've kind of speculated it may have been because of the association with British Grenadiers. That anything associated with British Grenadiers kind of became a taboo. So this song disappears. Then in January 1774, all of a sudden it appears back to life. And then it spreads like wildfire in January 1774. What happened in December of 1773, again in Boston? Boston Tea Party. The Boston Tea Party occurred, and around that same time the Intolerable Acts also came out. So again, I'm kind of speculating, maybe because of the Boston Tea Party and the Intolerable Acts, this song kind of was okay now to sing. Because I said, in January 1774, it's just, you see it in all the newspapers across the colonies. So again, we keep calling it the British Grenadiers, but it really should be called the New Massachusetts Song of Liberty. For you is the first all-American patriotic song. The Liberty Song was the first patriotic song. As I said, the lyrics weren't original. It was borrowed from a British tune. This tune is called Chester. And as I said, it's the first all-American patriotic song. It was written by an American. It's an original tune with original lyrics. It was written by William Billings in 1770. He was a very prolific composer in Boston. Chester came out in a songbook he created called the New England Psalm Singer. And in that book, he wrote 124 original songs. He eventually wrote 6 songbooks, so this guy could crank out songs. Now, as the name of the book it appears in, the New England Psalm Singer, this tune sounds a lot like a hymn you would sing in church, and the lyrics read a lot like a hymn out of songs in the Bible. In fact, you could probably fool most people into thinking it actually is out of the Bible, except in one line it says New England's God. If it didn't have New England in there, you could probably fool a person into thinking it was from the Psalms. So that's 1770. In 1778, William Billings rewrites it. He adds 3 new stanzas. He takes the original version, 1770, only had 2 stanzas. He separates the 2 stanzas and put 3 new stanzas in there. The war this time has been going on for 3 years, so those 3 new stanzas make references to the war. In one stanza, he mentions the British generals Burgoyne, Prescott, Howe, Clinton, and Cornwallis. The reason he mentions those 5 generals by name is because at that time, the Americans had been successful in Montreal, Saratoga, Princeton, and Boston. Each one of those generals he names was in command at one or more of those battles. So the message he's kind of sending there is, we can beat these guys. William Billings, well, after the war, Chester became the de facto national anthem for America. At that time we didn't have a national anthem. Does anybody want to guess how many national anthems, official national anthems we've had? Come on.
5.
Well, guess what year we had an official national anthem? 1931.
Wow.
So after the war, Hail Columbia was written in 1789. That kind of displaced Chester a little bit. The Star Spangled Banner was written in 1814. That displaced Chester. And then My Country 'Tis of Thee in 1832, 1834 came out. And so over time, Chester, that style of music kind of went out of favor. It disappeared from the public consciousness. And in 1956, a New England composer named William Schumann, he was a fan of William Billings and his music, so he wrote a composition called the New England Triptych, which consisted of 3 songs. All 3 were William Billings songs, and the third one was Chester. And so because of that composition he did, it brought Chester back into public consciousness. And so now, if you know any 18th century reenactors, they almost all know Chester. So I was told we got some descendants here, someone who was a fifer.
Yes,
Yeah,
the Carrick family.
yeah. He would have known this song. So again, when we play this song, it sounds a lot like a hymn because it was written as a hymn. One thing I want to add about William Billings, because of the copyright laws at the time, he didn't make a lot of money off what he wrote, and he actually died broke and was buried in an unmarked grave in Boston. Evidently, he wasn't much of a person to look at either. Here's an eyewitness description of him. Short of one leg, with one eye, without any address, and with an uncommon negligence of person. Still he spake and sung and thought as a man above the common abilities. So evidently he had a really beautiful voice, but he wasn't anything to look at. One person wrote that his shirt had tobacco stains on it from chewing tobacco. Okay. The next song we're going to play for you, it's a little bit different from the other songs. It's a new one, so hopefully we'll get through it all right without any problems. All the songs we've been playing for you now had lyrics that had some sort of message or meaning behind them. The tune we're going to play for you now, as far as we know, doesn't have any lyrics. And we're not playing it, we're not including this because of a meaning behind it. We're playing because of when and where it was played. In the 18th century, when armies fought and there were sieges and things like that, when one army would surrender, they had what they called the honors of war. Now, the honors of war were kind of like a gentleman's agreement. Typically, what would happen in the honors of war is the surrendering side would be granted permission to surrender with their flags flying. Their soldiers could be carrying their weapons with bayonets fixed, and their musicians could be playing a song. And typically what was expected was the musicians would play a song of the victorious army. And this was kind of a way of saying thank you for giving us the honors of war. The whole concept of the honors of war was that the surrendering army would give the appearance of still having their pride intact and still being a potent military force, so that they could defend themselves if they had to. Also, the music was important because, as you recall from history, at that time, if an army or military unit lost its flags, that was disgraceful. That was like a huge deal. But if they didn't have any music, that was like signifying they were dead. So you had to have your flags to keep your pride, and you had to have music to kind of show that you're still alive and functioning. Okay, the surrender of Charleston in 1780 is kind of a mess. The British had laid siege on Charleston for 45 days. In April, American General Lincoln, he was wanting to surrender. So he started the negotiations for surrendering to British General Clinton. The citizens of Charleston didn't want him to surrender, and they actually told Lincoln, if you surrender, we're going to burn down the town. I don't know why you do that, but that's what they said. So anyway, Lincoln backed out of the surrendering negotiations. So later, around May 12th, Lincoln said, this is it, we gotta surrender. So they restarted the surrendering process. So in this, and I think this is why Clinton did this, is because of the aborted surrender in April, that Lincoln didn't exactly follow the protocols you would expect him to have followed as a surrendering general. Clinton denied the Americans the honors of war. He said you have to case your flags, and you can't play a British tune. And Lincoln fired back, says, we would like to fly our flags, and we would like to play a British tune. And Clinton said, nope, keep your flags cased, and you can't play a British tune. So that kind of put the Americans in a bit of a pickle. If they played an American tune, that would be a big faux pas. That would go against all the protocols that were expected. It'd be a huge embarrassment for them that, who do you think you are? You're surrendering, but you're playing your own song. So what the Americans did, and there's no evidence who came up with this idea, they picked a neutral song, and it's called the Turks' March. This song was very popular in Europe, so it didn't have an identity with the Americans, it didn't have an identity with the British, so it was a safe neutral song. I assume that at some point the fifers and drummers had to be consulted because they were the ones expected to play it. So that's what they played during the surrendering ceremony, and there are 3 eyewitnesses to the surrender who wrote that this was the song they played. One was an American officer, one was an American enlisted man, and the other one was a Hessian officer on the British side. So we got 3 separate eyewitnesses all agreeing this was the song they played. Now, payback can be painful. 18 months later, there's a surrender at Yorktown. I guess Clinton really didn't think about the future. Had the surrender at Yorktown. The British are surrendering to Washington. So what does Washington do? And the British ask for the honors of war. He says, nope, you're not getting them. And not only that, he said, you have to play a British or German song. So, Clinton said you can't play a British song. Washington said you have to play a British or German song. So he's forcing them to embarrass themselves. And then, of course, there's some negotiating back and forth, but of course, George Washington gets his way. So anyway, this is the Turks' March. Hopefully we don't mess it up because this is a new one for us. And again, I have not been able to find any lyrics for it. I just think it was a tune that everyone knew. So that ends the presentation we had planned for tonight. If you got any questions about music or anything we're wearing or anything I said, any questions about anything? Yeah.
The drummer, I noticed that this hand you're holding makes,
Oh, like this?
yeah, why the difference? I mean,
Well, this is, if you hold it like this, there's different grips. This is called like a match grip, because they both match like this, makes it hard to play. So this is called, holding it like this, it's called traditional grip. So it makes it much easier to play like that, you know, with the way the drum is.
yeah.
That's why.
Typically, how many drummers, how many fifers, really? Fifers?
Yeah, it would vary. Usually a company, okay, I see your hat and thank you for your service, but back then, you know, here, if you say a company, you know how many men are a company. You say a regiment, you know approximately how many are a regiment. They didn't have that back then. A regiment could be anywhere from 50 to 500 guys. It's just, all it meant was a colonel, a guy who had the rank of colonel recruited these guys, and however many he got, that's what the regiment was. So generally, a company would have their own fifer and drummer. So whenever they would come together, so they're in a camp, you get the companies together, you get the regiments together, usually the drummers and fifers would get pooled together. They would band together. And that seems to be where the word band, because if you look historically, whenever the word band is used prior to then, it's usually referring to as a band of thieves. Band is not used in a positive context prior to that. So I think that's where the word band came to be associated with music, is they would get the musicians and band them together. It depends on how many units come together, but if it's a separate company, they would have one fifer and one drummer. But how many, you know, if you got an entire corps together, I mean, they could have a lot. And in the camps, in the Continental Army camps, they had very specific locations on where different people should be, and the fifers and drummers were located near the center of the
Did
camp.
the militia also have them?
Yeah. Not all militias had them, but militias did have them. Because like my ancestors, I thought they were in the militia, and at their company level, they had a fifer and drummer. Yeah.
What's the significance of the brass stick over there?
Yeah, I was wondering if anyone was going to ask. This is called a gorget. It's French for throat. The prevailing theory is that it goes back to the days of the knights in suits of armor. The gorget was the part that protected their throat. Knights were like officers in the military. So when you no longer had knights in shining armor, they kept this as a vestige of what they would wear around their neck, and it was a sign of rank. So the larger it is, the higher rank you are, and you only wear it when you're on duty. So even if you're like a colonel or a captain or general, if you're off duty, you don't wear it. I do this presentation, I said to a lot of school groups, and kids ask, is that to protect your heart? I said, well, first of all, if I'm relying on that to protect my heart, I'm in trouble. Second of all, it's a bright, shiny object, which is going to be real easy to aim at. Yeah. Any other questions?
Were you a history teacher?
No, I'm an engineer. Yeah, yeah.
Could we hear what the maple fife sounds like?
Okay. Just to refresh, I'll play a little bit of Chester here.
Are we all at Lulix?
Yeah.
This past,
Yeah.
we were there.
Okay. Did you come to our show there?
We didn't make the 5 o'clock thing, but we,
Well, we did Friday afternoon. We did.
oh no, we were there on Saturday.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I was there. He died.
Yeah. I always do. Saves powder.
So you weren't
I'm
a drummer?
cheap.
You weren't a drummer?
No.
Not for the reenactment.
No, I'm a reenact, yeah.
Yeah, they didn't have drummers or fifers at the battle, but that's.
No.
Yeah.
Do you know the tune to be able to play the one that goes with the Sons of Liberty?
I have to have a name.
No, it was not so far back. It was a well-known Disney movie.
Oh, you're talking about the Liberty Tree.
That's it. Do you know that one?
No, because that one
It's
was,
not official?
that one was made for the movie.
Okay, never mind.
Now, I know a song called The
I know
Liberty
it's in
Tree,
here.
but it's not that one.
Yeah.
The Liberty Tree I know was written by Benjamin Franklin.
They wrote it in here?
Yeah. I'll just play a little bit of it. Oh. I played it fast.
Thank you.
Yeah, but the one you're talking about was Johnny Tremaine. Yeah, they made that song.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would playing that, especially, I guess they had to play it loud, wouldn't that affect your hearing?
Yeah, I practice with earplugs.
Oh, you do? Okay. I'm sure they didn't have earplugs.
No.
So-
Well, if you play outside, it's not too bad.
Oh.
But
My wife wears the earplugs in my house.
But usually whenever we're playing, I'm always on this side of the drummers because my right-hand side's the louder side. So I always be nice to them, I put them on my left.
Yeah.
But occasionally you can't help it and they have to end up on my right. Any other questions?
What's the drum weigh?
I'm not actually for sure, but
Just. I'm sure that it's heavy to carry. Oh,
a little bit of it, so.
Yeah, that was another thing.
pounds.
That was another order George Washington had out, is the drummers were forbidden to put their drums on wagons.
Yes.
Why?
You had to carry them.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, if you put it on a wagon, you get separated from the wagon, you lost your drum. And another thing, for those of you who are musically inclined, when George Washington became commander-in-chief in the Continental Army, one of the first things he did, and he recognized how important music was for the military. One of the first things he did was he had all the fifes collected and brought together and separated by pitch, because they weren't all pitched the same. And so the groups would get fifes, the groups that were going to be playing together, they got the same pitched fifes. Historically speaking, the two predominant pitches at the time of the American Revolution were B flat and C. But of course, you're going to have some that are going to be a little bit off. But those were the two, and so he had them all separated by pitch and then redistributed them based on pitch. Because if you ever hear a B flat fife and a C play together, it's horrible.
How long have you been playing?
I started in 2013, so 13 years. I'm self-taught, so.
Great.
Yeah, I played the trumpet in high school. Oh no, I started playing the trumpet in 4th grade and I played all the way through high school. But that was the only instrument I played until 2013 when I took it to fife.
So they didn't have buglers then?
Yeah, they did.
They did,
Yeah.
okay.
The first documented use of buglers in the military is from 1755. It was in Germans used it. But in the Revolutionary War, they did have buglers. There's actually a young boy bugler that was killed by the British in North Carolina. There's a monument to it. But the buglers were exclusively for cavalry or mounted units. It's kind of hard to carry a drum and play a fife on horseback. Yeah.
Do you have any idea how far back music and battle became synonymous, became one? Then they used music?
It goes back to the Ottoman Empire. They were the first ones. Actually, the drums came from the Ottoman Empire. I don't know how much you know about the Ottoman Empire, but when they were conquering Europe, out of the area that's now like Romania, Bulgaria, that area. They literally kidnapped young boys, took them back, converted them to Islam, and they were called the Janissary troops. And they were also the musicians. So that's where the whole military music, as we know it today, came from. Now, of course, the Romans, they had trumpets, things like that. As far as playing established music like what we played for you, it started in the Ottoman Empire. Of course, the Ottomans, as they're infringing on Europe, the Europeans are picking up on this as well. And so it kind of spread as being a common thing in the military. Interestingly enough, some of the first instruments they used, obviously, were the drums, but also an early version of the French horn and oboes were the predominant military instruments. And then later on, they converted to fifes. Anything else?
And how long have you played the drums?
Not long. I've been doing this, 2 years.
But drumming's in his blood.
Yeah, my dad was a drummer, my brother was a drummer, I was a bass player. So, but I would mess around with my brother's drum kit and stuff like that, but that's a lot different than playing like this, so, I'm still learning, so.
Where do you go next for reenactment?
Where we're playing at the State Fair tomorrow, Saturday, and Sunday.
Thank you. Well, this was a real treat tonight. We really enjoyed it. Spencer County had 2 fifers, 2 musicians that moved here after the Revolutionary War. The first one was Michael Reeser. He made Little Mount his home. The second one was Benjamin Harrison Carrick. And we are honored tonight to have his great-granddaughter, Sarah Carrick, with us. Sarah, do you want to give a little wave? America 250 is so happy to put on these presentations, and we've decided that we're going to keep doing this. We're not going to stop. We're going to call ourselves America 250 and Beyond. Our next program is going to be in October, and it's going to be Ghost Stories. So keep your eye out for the Ghost Stories program.
Well, in the SAR, we're referring to it as the 10 years of the 250.
Oh, 10 years! That really is beyond.
We started last year officially, it goes until late 17, or until 2032.
Will you guys pose for a picture for me?
Sure. We get 5.